What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today, my boys are back, baby! Star Fox 2026! I can't believe it. A few days ago, I was sitting in this very same chair, probably, I don't know, without a Star Fox game, and now I'm sitting in this chair with a new Star Fox game announced, and with a lot of hope for the future of the Star Fox series. And I think that feeling is sort of contrasted with a lot of the internet, which doesn't seem very excited for this new, quote-unquote, Star Fox game coming out in just a month, because it is once again a remake of Star Fox 64. And while I am very excited to play Star Fox 64 again, I love Star Fox 64 and this rendition of it looks incredible, I am also just excited for the future of Star Fox, and this announcement and how it was announced and what it is that was announced has me even more excited than maybe I was a month ago when Nate brought up this rumor that we were going to get a Star Fox game in June of 2026, because I think the specific details of this Star Fox reboot make me feel like this is just step one in a bigger Star Fox plan rather than this being the thing. I don't think they just wanted to throw together something to tie in with the movie and now the franchise is going to go back on ice for 10 years. Like, I think this is the first shoe to drop, but there's an even bigger shoe that's going to slam right over it in the next few years. And in this video, I'm going to talk about why. I've got a lot of notes on my monitor next to me here, and we're just going to go through why I think this is not just an isolated incident. This is the first step in the Star Fox revitalization project. And as a big Star Fox fan, I couldn't be more excited. So let's just get right into it. And I think I'm going to start this with a little bit of discussion about the game itself. Now, I'm not going to talk about my deep thoughts about this game because, boy, hasn't everyone given their opinion on this one already. It's been the topic of so much discourse on Twitter and YouTube and such, and I've even given my own thoughts on the game, right? When it got revealed, I made a short. I'll link it down below if you want to watch it. So I'm not going to talk about my thoughts necessarily, but I will talk about my thoughts about what we saw as it pertains to what it could mean for the future of Star Fox, because I think this game made a very specific and conscious decision in how it wanted to present itself, and I think that could suggest big things for the Star Fox franchise. So I think the biggest point of contention for Star Fox 2026 is the realistic art style, which I think inarguably looks technically impressive. It's very sharp, very high fidelity. The cutscenes look incredible, the lighting is spectacular, but obviously it's a striking direction for Star Fox to go in after years of cartoony, playful art styles, and also after seeing Star Fox in that Mario Galaxy movie and seeing him in not just one, but two different stylized cartoony art styles, right? You had the Illumination art style where he looked all cutesy, and then you had that really sick anime art style as well. So certainly going from that to what we saw on Wednesday was a bit of a shock, but once I got used to those designs and once I got used to how the world of Star Fox 64 is being presented in this remake, I really did start to dig it, and I do think it makes a lot of sense as well. I heard some takes online about how this remake doesn't feel like Nintendo. It almost feels like something PlayStation would do. But I don't think that's by accident. Not to say that Nintendo wanted to copy PlayStation or that they were designing this Star Fox 64 remake saying, we gotta make a PlayStation game. But what I am saying is that PlayStation targets a Western audience with their releases. A lot of their studios are from North America or Europe, and their games are very cinematic, and the PlayStation 5 is absolutely tanking in Japan right now. Like, they are focused on a Western audience, and they've certainly captured that demographic to the point where in the US, the PS5 and the Switch 2 are kind of neck and neck. If not, the PS5 is a little higher. Now, the Switch 2 has done so well because it's been this revelation in Japan. It's been doing so well over there. But the point is, Nintendo doesn't necessarily make their games for a North American audience. They are, at best, making their games for a wider global audience, and sometimes they're making games that maybe speak more to the interest of people in Japan or people in the East more generally. Look at the fact that Kirby Air Riders has sold like 50% of its copies in Japan, right? There's certain things that that demographic likes that Nintendo plays very well to. And I'm getting really technical here, but the point I'm trying to approach is that Nintendo doesn't really have a franchise that targets a Western audience specifically. Maybe Metroid, especially 3D Metroid, but for the most part, they don't. And I don't think for the most part it would make sense for them to pivot and do that. But I think Star Fox specifically is one of the few franchises they have where it does make sense to take this more Western approach in terms of design and marketing. Maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse here or whatever, but I think if Star Fox is going to be a breakout hit, it has to do really well in the West. And I think regardless, it is going to have an outsized appeal in the West compared to Japan. Just look, for example, at the view counts for the Star Fox Direct. On Nintendo of America's page, the Star Fox Direct has over 2.4 million views. In Japan, it's just over a mil. And this discrepancy is not usually the case. Oftentimes, YouTube videos will do better on Nintendo's Japanese account than they will the NOA account. For example, the release date trailer for Splatoon Raiders had 1.4 million views in the US and 2.5 million in Japan. The September Direct had 5.3 million views on NOA's channel and 8 million on the Japanese channel. The one really notable exception to this is the Donkey Kong Bonanza Direct, which had 4.4 million views here in the West, but only 2 million views in Japan. And I want to bring that up because I want you to store that in your head for later, because I think the Donkey Kong comparison is a really interesting one. But I want to stick right now to this idea of this game being made for a Western audience. The point is the Japanese Nintendo account usually outpaces the NOA account when it comes to views on Nintendo announcements, but that is not the case at all here with the Star Fox Direct. I think that speaks to the fact that this is a game and a franchise that is going to appeal more to the West than it will to Japan. And I think it's sort of recursive, if that's the word, in that not only is this game probably going to appeal more to the West, but I think this game is trying to appeal more to the West as well. It goes both ways. And I think a really interesting way it is doing that, seemingly, is that the Japanese voice acting doesn't have lip syncing. If you go on the Japanese video for Star Fox or the Japanese website for Star Fox, you'll see that the Japanese voice acting isn't synced, whereas it is on the English trailer that we got on the NOA YouTube channel. So it seems to me they are prioritizing the English dub of this game, which again would suggest that they are sort of marketing to the West. And given that this game is leaning into this grittier space opera vibe, seemingly just based off of the art direction, it does make sense to encourage the use of English voice actors, right? Just from a creative standpoint. It's almost like what Suda does with the No More Heroes series, where yes, Grasshopper Manufacture is a Japanese development studio, but you're meant to use the English voice acting for Travis Touchdown even if you don't speak English, right? The game is designed with that voice and that character and that personality in mind. And obviously there's voice acting for a good number of languages in this Star Fox game, so it's not as though Nintendo is forcing you to use the English voice acting for like creative reasons, but it certainly is encouraging you to use it, and it certainly is making the experience a little bit easier and a little bit more accessible for English-speaking audiences. And that's just another reason why this game sort of stands in contrast to a lot of the rest of Nintendo's catalog, and I think it's trying to. I think that's purposeful. And I think that's why, more generally, I do think a remake makes sense to reintroduce people to Star Fox, because I think the point here is to eliminate as many barriers as possible to becoming a Star Fox fan, or reintroducing yourself to Star Fox and becoming one again. Star Fox 64 is the most beloved, best-selling, most critically acclaimed game in the Star Fox series. And now, you don't have to play it on NSO. You don't have to play it on the 3DS. You don't have to play it on the N64. Now it's here on the Switch too, with more intuitive controls, cleaner UI, new cutscenes added, and people keep saying, well, they could have just reintroduced Star Fox with a new game. It didn't have to be with a remake. And that is obviously true, like, They could have introduced Star Fox with anything. It didn't have to be a remake, but I do think it makes more sense to reboot this franchise with a remake. It's just a more accessible entry point than a new game, especially if that game is going to take a bigger swing and is going to be a bigger, newer experience than we're used to with Star Fox, and especially if it is adventures inspired, which some rumors have talked about. But it also makes sense because Nintendo has done this time and time again. Starting with a remake to reintroduce people to the franchise or get people excited for the franchise, and then a few years later coming out with the new game. And they've done this a number of times in the Switch era. And that's why I feel more confident in this being step one rather than just being, something testing the waters to see if people want more Star Fox. If this was 2016 and Nintendo did this, I would say, oh god, this isn't going to go well because, well, they kind of did do this in 2016 with Star Fox Zero and it didn't go well, but also because they didn't really have a history of building up franchises like they have had in the Switch era. So let's go through some of the franchises Nintendo has done a similar approach with to build them up and lead to a new release. Obviously, 2D and 3D Metroid have both seen this happen. 2D Metroid had Samus Returns in 2017, and then Metroid Dread in 2021. 3D Metroid had Prime Remastered in 2023, and that game was even apparently done earlier than 2023, and then Prime 4 came out in 2025. Even Famicom Detective Club, which is one of Nintendo's smallest active franchises, had a pair of remakes in 2021, and then a new game in 2024. And I think the biggest one, and the one that spiritually feels the most similar to what's going on with Star Fox right now, to me, is Donkey Kong, which got a remaster in early 2025 of DKC Returns, and then just a few months later, had a big new game release in July. And this has also happened with other Nintendo franchises. It happened with technically 2D Mario and 2D Zelda, though those were already so well established that I don't think they're really important to this conversation, but I think Donkey Kong is a really shrewd comparison because I want to take you back to January 2025, which somehow feels like a lifetime ago. But I remember when DKC Returns came out, and specifically before the Switch 2 announcement that kind of got everyone going crazy, people were concerned about the Donkey Kong franchise and about Donkey Kong as an IP for Nintendo. I don't think the concern was as dramatic as it is with Star Fox because I think we all kind of had the feeling, even if it felt like cope at the time, that DK was going to return in a big way at some point in the Switch 2 generation. I don't think many of us thought it was going to be literally right away, but I remember hearing a lot of people talking about how Nintendo didn't seem to know what to do with Donkey Kong. They were remastering a game that was 15 years old and making a theme park based off of that 15-year-old material. Where's the new Donkey Kong? We were all asking. Why can't Nintendo do something exciting with this franchise? We were all asking. And then literally 3 months after the release of Donkey Kong Returns HD, we got that answer in flying colors with the reveal of Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is an incredible game, and even if it isn't selling as well as maybe we would have expected, I think solidified Donkey Kong as a big franchise for Nintendo and really had him return to the spotlight. And I think they want to do the same thing with Star Fox. And I think you can draw another comparison between Donkey Kong Returns HD and Star Fox 2026, and that's in the sort of weird, quiet marketing cycle for the game. And I always hate when I say marketing because people are so annoying with that term. But let's think about how Nintendo revealed Star Fox 2026. It felt more elongated than it was because we knew about it a month ahead of time because of Nate telling us. But we weren't supposed to know that, right? We were supposed to check our phones on some random day and see that a new Star Fox game was announced. And honestly, that is still what happened because they announced a Star Fox Direct for 6 p.m. on Wednesday at 5:50 p.m. on Wednesday. I was scrolling YouTube and I saw an Arlo stream that was like reacting to the Star Fox Direct. And I was like, is that a prank? Is he doing a bit? And then no, there was an actual Star Fox Direct that got announced literally 10 minutes before it happened. And the game is coming out in late June. The reveal to release cycle here is shorter than I think Nintendo has ever done. They usually give their games at least 3 months between reveal and release, and even when they already have a game revealed but want to give it a release date, they usually give a few months in between release date reveal and actual release date. For example, Splatoon Raiders got about 10 weeks between release date reveal and actual release date. And sure, maybe they did push this back a week or two to spite Nate. I know that's what some people have been saying, and in that case, if this game got revealed mid-April, it would have been a 9-month reveal to release cycle, which is a little bit more standard for Nintendo. But let's assume for a second, because that is sort of like fan fiction-y, let's assume for a second Nintendo wasn't just trying to spite some guy on the internet. As much as I love Nate, he is just a guy on the internet. And let's say that this was always the plan. They were always going to reveal Star Fox 2026 at 6 p.m. on a random Wednesday, and they were going to tell us about the reveal 10 minutes before the actual reveal. That, to me, kind of suggests that this is not as big of a deal as some people are making it out to be. Again, it sort of feels like we've known about this game for months because of Nate, but we haven't. We've known about this game for 3 days, and it's coming out in a month and some change, right? This game was sprung on us very quickly, and I think if this was the main thing for Star Fox, if there wasn't something else, another shoe to drop, I think they would have given this more fanfare. They could have revealed it back in September. Heck, they could have just given us a Star Fox Direct earlier in the year. Sure, you could explain some of that away with movie synergy, right? Wanting to have a game released sort of alongside the movie that heavily features Star Fox, but this isn't a Mario Galaxy movie game. This is a Star Fox game. I don't think the movie prevented Star Fox from being announced earlier, because if they announced a Star Fox game in September or even in February, no one would have thought anything of it. No one would have been like, oh, he must be in the movie now. We all would have been like, oh, nice, new Star Fox game coming out in June. That's soon. Pretty cool. But Nintendo only gave us 8 weeks of warning, and I do think that suggests that this is a little bit more of a low-key release. And if so much was riding on this remake, if this was the thing, that if it doesn't do well, Star Fox is back on the shelf, I don't think they would do that. I think they would give it more of a moment. I think they would give it more time to breathe. And I mean, to that point, this game is coming out a week before Rhythm Heaven. It's only coming out a month before Splatoon Raiders. Both games that you could argue are more significant from a sales perspective than Star Fox. I mean, Star Fox Zero couldn't even sell 500,000 units on the Wii U, as far as we know. Splatoon certainly has more prestige than Star Fox, and Rhythm Heaven has been on the shelf for a while, so you could argue it's equal, maybe a little bit lesser than Star Fox. But the point is, they're packing a lot in a month's time, and sure, Star Fox is the one kicking off that month-long period of games, but it does feel like a tight squeeze for this game, unless there is another game coming in a year or two. Because to bring back the Donkey Kong Country Returns HD comparison, that game did have about 6 months between reveal and release, but it was buried in that June Direct. It was a headline amongst all of these huge announcements, right? New 2D Zelda, Metroid Prime 4, new Mario Party, new Mario and Luigi, a bunch of cool third-party stuff. All of that stuff certainly overshadowed the remaster of Donkey Kong Returns HD. And then, while it did have 6 months between reveal and release, and it did come out in a time where not a lot of Nintendo games were releasing, the game came out on the same day as the reveal of the Switch 2, which to me kind of suggested you don't need to care about this, right? Buy it if you'd like, but there's more to come. And I think they're doing a similar thing with Star Fox in that they're putting a lot of stuff around it. The reveal to release cycle is very rushed. I think all of that suggests that there's more to come, and this is sort of just the appetizer to the main course of a big new Star Fox game in a few years. And I think it's worth contrasting the reveal of this game, Star Fox 2026, to the last Star Fox game, Star Fox Zero. Star Fox Zero functionally was kind of similar to Star Fox 2026 it is basically a remake of Star Fox 64 with more bells and whistles, which is what Star Fox 2026 is doing. But remember how big of a deal they made of Star Fox Zero? They teased it at E3 2014 with the infamous footage of Miyamoto playing a blurred game on the TV with the gamepad, talking about how we're gonna bring new gamepad experiences to you in the future. Then they teased at the Game Awards in 2014 while showing off footage of Breath of the Wild that Star Fox would release for the Wii U before Breath of the Wild. Then they had the big reveal at E3 2015 alongside that puppet skit and a documentary of Miyamoto talking about his thought process in making Star Fox Zero. And the game still didn't come out until April of 2016. Star Fox Zero ostensibly had a 2-year hype cycle. Star Fox 2026 isn't even getting 2 months. And obviously, Star Fox Zero was such a disaster for Nintendo that I'm sure they've reevaluated their marketing strategies. And so it makes sense that they would take a different strategy with this new Star Fox game. But I think it is worth noting how different those reveal to release cycles are and how much less of a deal they are making of this new Star Fox game. And look, do I think we're going to see this Star Fox game imminently? Sort of like how with DK Bonanza we saw it just a few months after DKC Returns HD came out. I'm not really sure. I know there's some rumors that a new big Star Fox Adventures type game is going to come out in 2027, but I don't know. The source for that is like YouTube comments that, yes, got other things right, but I don't know. That seems very fishy to me. But I mean, if that is the case, certainly we're going to see the next Star Fox game before June of 2027. But even if that's not true, even if there is a new Star Fox game eventually, but it's not Adventures inspired and it doesn't come out in 2027, I do think it's really possible, if I'm right, that we see the next Star Fox game by the end of 2027. Even if it's a 2028 release or something like that, I do sort of feel like if there is another shoe to drop, we're going to find out about it relatively soon. As in, by the end of 2027, rather than, 2029 for a 2030 release. And I want to talk about one more thing in terms of Star Fox 2026, which I think also feeds back into this idea of there being something bigger. And that's who's making this game. I said in a short that I thought it would be developed internally because I thought they would want to make a big deal of Star Fox's return, but I also thought this was going to be a new game. That's sort of what Nate was thinking it was going to be, but obviously it turned out to be a remake. So now that we know it's a remake, I'm not really sold that it would be developed internally. Obviously, there are support studios at EPD that could be helping with this project, but I don't think one of the main EPD groups that produce and develop games are going to be making this Star Fox remake. And I don't think it's next level, which a lot of people theorized it could be before we saw it, just because I think this would be a very big departure for next level games, given how this game looks and the art direction of it. Sure, they are masters of environmental and lighting design, which this game really excels at, so I wouldn't say it's impossible that this is next level games, but I guess I could buy that more if these designs were a little bit more cutesy, a little bit more cartoony. And I also just can't imagine next level games doing a remake, considering how important they were in the Switch generation and how important they theoretically will be in the Switch 2 generation, given how big of a deal Luigi's Mansion 4 probably will be whenever it comes out. So I kind of think this has Bandai Namco's name written all over it. There was a rumor back in 2022 that Nintendo contracted Bandai Namco to do a remake of a 3D action game, which obviously would suggest Star Fox. That is a descriptor that befits Star Fox very well. And it could just be one of the numerous studios that work on Nintendo games within Bandai Namco, but maybe it could also be Bandai Namco Studios Singapore, which Nintendo just bought and I think is being renamed to Nintendo Studios Singapore or something. After all, the last game they developed with Nintendo was Splatoon 3 in 2022, so the timelines there would line up. To be fair, they did make their own game in 2025 called Hiragami, but it seems like, based off of a cursory glance I gave to Moby Games, not everyone in Bandai Namco Studios Singapore who worked on Splatoon 3 worked on Hiragami. If someone is more knowledgeable on that, correct me in the comments below, but it seems like not everyone who worked at Bandai Namco Singapore and with Nintendo worked on Hiragami. I don't know, it's very confusing. So I don't think Hiragami would prevent BN Singapore from working on or even being the lead developer on Star Fox 2026. But the one conflict I have in my head is I feel like they could very well be supporting on Splatoon Raiders. I think EPD5 and the Splatoon team are the lead developers on that game, but given that BN Singapore supported on Splatoon 3, I definitely think they could be involved with Splatoon Raiders. And if that's the case, I really don't think they would be working on a Star Fox remake as well, but who knows? The point I'm trying to make here, though, I'm kind of getting in the weeds again, is that I think this game is being outsourced. I don't think it's being developed internally. Maybe it's being developed by an internal studio, but I don't think EPD is going to be largely involved with this game, certainly not one of their main groups that develop games themselves. And I think that would lend more credence to the fact that there is something bigger coming. Because if this Star Fox remake is supposed to be the big thing that reboots Star Fox, I feel like it would be handled internally. After all, I keep comparing Star Fox's situation to Donkey Kong's, and the big new game for the Donkey Kong franchise was one developed internally by EPD8. So if we're to assume that Star Fox 2026 is made by someone like Bandai Namco, which of course is a big assumption, we have no idea in actuality who's making this game, I think that could also suggest that there's another bigger game coming that is developed internally. Because I feel like whatever the biggest Star Fox thing is that's going to happen in the next few years, and again, I don't think it's Star Fox 2026, I think it's something after that, I feel like whatever the biggest inflection point for the Star Fox franchise is, Nintendo's gonna wanna have their hands on that internally. Because sure, a Star Fox 64 remake to get people ready for a bigger, newer Star Fox game, yeah, they can hand that off to someone else. But the bigger, newer Star Fox game, the main event for this reboot, I don't feel like they would have the confidence in handing that off to a support studio, to a third-party studio, maybe even to someone like Next Level Games. I think they would want that game to be developed internally by EPD. Obviously, support studios from all sorts of places would help with the game, but I feel like primarily they would want the director and producer of that game to be from within EPD. So this whole part of the video could age very poorly in just a few weeks when we learn who is making this game. But for now, I do think the feeling that a lot of us have that this game is developed by a third-party partner like Bandai Namco or Bandai Namco Singapore, which is technically a first-party studio at this point, I think that lends credence to the fact that something bigger is coming. So that's my way too in-depth speculation about how I think this is just the beginning. Star Fox 2026 is the first domino to fall in a bigger plan to revitalize Star Fox. But tell me in the comments, do you think I'm right? Do you think there's something else coming for Star Fox, or is this cope and is the only thing we're gonna get for Star Fox this generation another darn remake of Star Fox 64? Who knows? Tell me in the comments your thoughts on everything I've said today, and tell me your thoughts on Star Fox 2026 more generally. Do you like it? Are you sort of turned off by the designs? Leave it all below. It's a freaking party down there. Let's get some discourse going on Star Fox 2026. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, hit that big fat button. I've been doing the works on the shorts recently. I've had some shorts do pretty well, so thank you for that. If you'd like to check those out, they're under the shorts tab. But I also recently did a review of Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, which I have been having a ton of fun with. I think I'm like 70 or 80 hours deep into that game, and honestly, I don't feel like I'm gonna stop because it's just that darn good. So check out that video if you're interested. Make sure to share this video with someone who is stoked for Star Fox 2026. He's back, baby! Action figures! Star Fox! Imagine how good this is gonna look in 4K HDR. Oh, can't wait. Anyway, with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Do a barrel roll! It's not Peppy, but they don't have a Peppy amiibo, so it'll have to do.